I know some of you guys, some of you that I don't. My name is Pat Brubaker. I'm the owner, head chef, and bottle washer of Custom Rides and Imperial Wheeling Machines. And today we're going to talk about shrinking. Carrie got into some shrinking today, and I'm going to show you a few different ways to do the same thing because not everybody's got the same tools. And I've always been a shrink first kind of guy for the simple fact when you continually shrink metal, it does not actually get harder. It just acts like a thicker piece of metal after you've smoothed it. If you stretch and stretch and stretch on a piece, you'll create enough outward shove and surface tension that you can run out of horsepower. Has anybody actually made a panel that was too stiff? You really couldn't do any more to it? It's a nightmare. It's frustrating.
With steel.
Yeah. And
aluminum can get pretty stiff too.
Kind of the goofy thing, a lot of my mentors were power machine guys, and getting started I didn't have a lot of tools, and I just sat and thought and tried to think how could I do that with what I have. Well, the sheet metal doesn't care, and this is the world's worst tool sales pitch. If you repeat the action, if it's the same action, the metal does not care how you do it. Absolutely does not care. Does that make sense? A fast strike or a slow push, as long as it's the same pressure, the metal doesn't know any different. So, who's got an echo? 2, 3, Bob. Bob, the crusher of dreams. So 3 out of how many here have an echo? Wonderful, wonderful machine. Makes scrap at a record pace.
Oh, yeah. Amen to that.
Now, I built this machine to be a similar style of a machine. It mechanically grabs and shoves the metal together. So we've got a little piece here. Say you're making a door skin or a roof insert, or taking the 80s out from the car, getting rid of the sunroof. You've got to make a big patch. You can go along the edge here and actually have a crown in this panel, and you're not really shrinking it that aggressively. You can do the same thing with the Lancaster, but if it's a great big panel, you can't hold it and run the handle at the same time. If you've got who's got a kick shrinker? Now, how many times have you had a panel that's almost too big that you can't reach the foot pedal, but you still do it because you have the tool? Everybody?
Got it on here.
Yeah.
And I got long legs, I still can't reach it.
Yeah. So, if you guys want to shuffle up here, this will be a shuffle in and shuffle back.
I'll watch from a distance.
So this machine mechanically shoves the metal together. Okay, so didn't take long at all. Not much time at all. So that thing has 3/16 of an inch of crown one way, a lot more crown the other way.
That was flat a few minutes ago.
Yeah. So if the piece is this big, that's fine. And you know, no surface defects. So if you're making a door skin, Good way to start, because now it's not floppy. But you have to have the tools to do it. So trying to understand how this works, 1018 cold roll has a yield strength of 53,700 and some pounds. So that machine had to generate that much pressure somewhere. That's what it takes to shrink it. Well, how do you do it without that machine? And not screw it up.
With a torch,
Exactly.
shrinker on the edge.
Mm-hmm. Now, Gary Drake's sitting right here. We made a trunk lid skin for his Anglia in a metal shape and get together in oblong. And nobody wanted to say anything. They wanted to stand and watch the train wreck, didn't they?
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
Hear people mumbling and grumbling, oh, it just ruined half a sheet of sheet metal. They came back about, 3 hours later.
Yep.
How'd you do that? Show me, do it again.
Yep, yep.
No, go away.
They left.
You could have hung out. You could have helped. It's a big piece. So when you stop and think about it, the footprint of those dies, the effective area is very, very narrow. Well, we don't want to try to repeat that pattern with a torch because it's hard to do, and the variable is us. We're going to screw it up. So we're going to try to heat a 1/4 inch red hot line around this panel. So for easy math, we can't make a square red hot on this. But if you take that 53,000 pounds and put it on a 1/4 inch square, it's 200,000 pounds of pressure. It has to do something. So I'm going to heat this way and go another way there, as equal and opposite as I can. Now, Duck, how wild and wampus did your trunk lid get and people started grumbling?
Man, I don't think it went, we had a bigger piece, and I don't think it went that bad, but, how big a piece was it? Well, 3 by 3. 3 foot square? Yeah, and it had two different, it had one radius this way, one radius that way. We had to work with it.
So you can see how wild and wampus that edge is getting.
Yeah.
The surface tension in the metal will pull it back. Haven't heard anybody muttering yet that we're ruining this piece, so.
You're ruining that piece.
Okay, now I feel better.
So why wouldn't you just make a pass all the way around the sequence?
Because you need to attempt to do it equal and opposite. It comes out twisted
Okay.
if you just go around it. It still shrinks, but the part ends up a little twisted.
You said you're shooting for about a 1/4 inch wide red
Yep.
band. All averages.
It's interesting that we did the other two sides, the metal bow up.
Yeah.
Obviously going crossways, the metal.
Yeah, the ruffle's gone out now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty fun.
But it's still heating and some of that too, so it's really cool, it's shrinking and completed.
But
You gotta wait for the whole panel to come back to uniform temperature throughout the whole panel, and then you'll see what you really have to
Yeah.
do.
well, what would you say, Steve, that the lion's share of the shrinking is done when you can comfortably touch it? You know, like the shrinking disc doesn't get things very hot, but if hot enough you don't want to touch it.
Hot enough to make steam if you put water on it.
That's what I always heard, is if it's hot enough to sizzle when you put water on it, then it's hot enough to sizzle.
Okay.
Okay.
To sizzle, it's gonna be 212 degrees at 16.
So we'll let that cool, and we'll set up another thing here. So now, using your shrinker stretcher, say making a windshield frame, the bottom of it's rusted out. How many times you go back and forth, back and forth? Oh crap, I overdid this, and oh crap, I underdid this, and overdid it the next time. Well, a lot of the time I'll drag this little stand over to the car and just clamp the metal to a T-dolly, and with a sweep or a radius gauge or a finger gauge taken from the car, just heat a little red hot spot and a little pressure. So not much pressure at all.
We've done that upon it.
Huh?
I've done that upon it.
Well, and it's
I didn't have a strength machine when I was young. I had torches and welders and
well,
just taught things. But,
unfortunately, a lot of simple things have just been lost to time.
yeah, but that still comes in handy as quick. I throw out the torch all the time.
Now, what's the other appeal of this? Doing this way? Huh? Yeah. Now, the other thing, when you've got a giant new quarter panel for, say, the 1970 road code, can you hold that 12-foot quarter panel and run the kick shrinker? You can put a ratchet strap around the panel to put tension on it, and just go in there and give it a few red hot spots. Aftermarket fenders that are too flat, you can see behind the door, fish a ratchet strap through and put some tension on them, and heat shrink the inner structure and re-arch the door right out to the door, or the fender right out to the door.
What could be more successful is to put your hand closer to the heat.
Did Wiseacre.
Yeah.
So,
That's still warm.
Yeah.
It'll move a little bit more.
but that's a lot for a rock and stick type method. And you know, adjusting a new quarter panel or a fender just to fit and flow, you don't need to be that aggressive. But it's simple.
The only thing is you did burn the protective coating off by the time you got to that stage.
I tell you what, everything that we put a quarter or a fender on, we blasted because we found rust under that E-coat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So, any questions, what ifs, or where would you use that?
Well, you went too far, so now you got relief essentially of that. What would be your method? Just a T-dolly and hammer?
Yep, just
At least a little of it?
kind of a linear stretch type of either a round T-dolly or a soft round faced square hammer.
Yeah, that's what a flat T-dolly with a bit of a radius face in the hammer.
Yeah.
Well,
That would still be a radial stretch, though.
No. Yeah, there we go.
About time.
with a thin flange like that, you can actually stretch that just by pushing down on the panel.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much, it's not gonna resist.
Only a half-inch flange.
If you've got this supported on each end, you could just push on this gradually on something this small, and it'll just stretch.
Okay.
And it's not that difficult.
Linear push.
Not right now. but anyway.
So, yeah, if I overcooked this, I'd go to a flat T-dolly or against the edge of the table with a round-faced hammer to stretch this in a linear fashion to open it back up. Because if you go this way, kind of a radial stretch, it's going to want to grow a goose egg. Cool off faster. But look at the shape
Yeah.
for,
For very little work.
yeah, not a lot of effort.
No, you have to just let it sit in the air cool too.
Yeah.
That way they'll wheel.
You could force it to work.
Now, again, no surface defects. And duck's trunk lid about 3 feet square, and that really freaked people out. They're just standing around trying to watch a train wreck. But
Now, as you said, I think you made a statement, sometimes based on the size of the panel, it's wider than, longer than it is wide. That technique then is going to create like a compound curve because of the size of the metal as opposed to square.
this is already a compound curve.
Oh, it is?
It's curved in
When I
both
say-
directions.
But it's gonna be two different sweeps. In other words,
Yeah.
the long one's gonna be a lesser sweep, the cross car down the center line car is gonna be a tighter sweep.
The if we had a 2 foot by 3 foot piece,
Yeah.
the 3 foot piece will have more arch to it.
The 3 foot might
Yeah.
have more.
Now, in the case of
Yeah.
the
Because-
triplet you said you did in oblong, you had two different sweeps.
Yeah.
Across.
Yeah, but it was
It was almost square.
But we had to wheel the rest in.
Okay.
We had to selectively wheel to make the,
That's how you, because you would have started out with an basically an equal sweep.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, but the long way just has more metal to shrink, so it's easy to overcook it that
Oh.
direction.
So that's when you have to be careful with.
Yep.
So how close to the trunk lid? Let's say you need some room to bend a flange on the side of it.
Mhm.
How much extra room and you go flanging and cutting and trimming? How much of that's gonna relieve or how much of it's gonna stay in the house?
If you trim,
If you gently wheel this, none. Because you think it has tension all the way around the edge, and when you gently wheel it, all that tension finds a home. It's blending all that stress.
Yeah.
I think part of what he was asking though is, if you've got that shrunk around the edge to get your compound shape in
And we
there,
just went and sheared this off.
if you take that off of there, what's gonna happen to the panels?
Good question.
It will lose some, but it will still have a crown.
Okay.
Now, no, this has cooled off a little bit. No surface defects.
No.
It's wavy along the edge, but that's.
Yeah, right there.
I could have picked up a bent piece also.
Excuses.
Yeah,
You just weren't uniform.
Yeah. Barbed wire part.
But again, that'll we'll have to fix it.
Yeah, I can just fat-hand it out of there.
Yeah.
Real simple.
Of course, the panel is soft
Yeah,
because you didn't work it.
yeah. Now,
Okay.
I did this as a demonstration for a car club, made a 34 Ford door, and everything went very well, and I had time left, and I asked the crowd, does anybody have any questions? You know, I put the sweeps on and it fit. And anybody have any questions? You know, everything went real smooth, and we've got some time left, and some wiseacre in the first row says, you made the wrong side. Nope, just turn it inside out. And you could have knocked the first 2 rows over with a feather.
Yeah.
So, feel the tension in that, it takes a turn. Turn it from right side out forward. I've been accused of having hydraulic stuff. No surface defect. So you don't have to have a power shrinking machine.
So how much, where you just had it sitting on that pipe?
Yeah, just sit right.
So let's say it's bigger, maybe it's up on your work, block up on yours.
Just so the edges aren't touching. Just so, if we had a car in here, I would take a T-square and slide it across the floor and mark the doors. That's the highest point on the door. And that's where I would support the sweat. Because all the shape falls away from there. That's where I would go with that.
And you air cooled that, what happens, is there a different effect if you cooled it off faster than water cooled it?
It's gonna gain some surface tension, and if you can't cool it evenly, it may get a little funny. It's not worth it to me when it comes out with no defects.
So you shrunk too much, just wheel the edge.
Yeah, if this is overcooked, I would just go to the English wheel right on the edge and just give it 1 pass, 2 pass, recheck. It's amazing how much that'll open it up. So same effect, torch, machine. Who's got a torch in here?
Oh, of course.
Torch,
Of course.
oxyacetylene torch.
Now, couldn't do that again if I tried. I mean, that's how it's supposed to go. But
Yes.
now, just wrapping your mind around what the metal will and won't do. The metal's lazy. It's always looking for the path of least resistance. And if you create one, it'll do what you want. So that's pretty gentle. Now we're gonna get fairly brutal with it here and make some tucks and actually smash the tucks into themselves. Earlier today, Carrie was showing you a flexible shape pattern. And there are a lot of guys that do beautiful work with these. They don't talk to me. They don't tell me what to do.
Because they don't spray the grass.
Pat?
Is that the problem?
No, they don't. They definitely do not.
Interesting.
So, my preferred method is just masking paper. Now, this tells me what to do, where to do it, how much, and hey, dummy, make that out of 2 pieces. How does this tell me how many pieces to make something out of?
Small overlap.
Yeah.
Small gaps.
Yeah.
So it overlaps like 3/4 of an inch, try something else.
Yeah. So if I hold this up, you can see where I've taped it together and I've marked the ends of the overlap. That is the maximum depth of shrink in the panel. And it tells me I need 1, 3, 4, 5 shrinks. Yeah, if this is overlapped 3/4 of an inch, you're cruising for a bruising. Because it's not a 1/4 inch. It's actually 2/4. Yeah. Yeah. So this tells me what to do, where to do it, and how much. And hey, dummy, don't do that. Your afternoon's gonna suck if you do. I've marked the same information onto the blank. And what we're making is this section of this fender here.
Hey, Pat,
Hmm.
you missed how you made the paper to start with. Want to go over that quick?
Yeah. That is a good point. If I omit something, just yell it out. So really, all I did with this paper was lay it on here and taped it down in a couple spots. And I just made a few cuts and tried to tape it down. And if it wouldn't lay down smooth, I'd make another cut. Do not make a cut every inch. You know, machinists, they live and die in very rigid rules. If you make a cut every inch, you lose the severity of the shape. because every overlap is now, 30 thousandths. We need to see what we need for a shrink.
And it isn't always uniform, so an inch isn't always the correct spacing.
Yeah.
And you
Just-
can go from a stretch to a shrink as you go across your pan.
Yeah. If this is overlapped like this, the majority of it is shrink. If it's opened up, it has to be taped open, that area needs to stretch. So real quick here, radius gauge keeps falling off the wheel.
Was that one hit the roof?
So we're gonna do this in the Arbor press, which I happen to manufacture and have for sale.
Yes, man.
Okay, so 2.5 inch radius. That's kind of odd, but that's what the part is. So I want to choose a pusher for the Arbor press that is roughly half of that.
1 1/4.
Now, the only reason I want to do half of that is to account for some spring back, because when I push down on it, it's going to come together and make a ruffle, and then it's going to open back up.
So which algorithm did you use to determine that?
Hmm?
What algorithm did you use to determine that?
No, none of that. Just screwed up enough stuff and figured, yeah, that's kind of what I should do. So this is pretty close. Close counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and die selection. So, now these dies have a giant flat on it. Why is that? Even that high a crown of a die has a pretty good flat spot on it. If we're swinging a hammer like this, we need all the advantage we can get. This should be completely round, because everybody in here can work at a sustained 1/16 of a horsepower. Now you apply mechanical advantage, it just puts nasty pokes in it. So you have to spread that extra force across that flat to not just put pokes in it, because we want this to shrink.
What are your dies made? Is that UHMW?
So I've marked the stop of the overlap from the pattern here. Now the thing that's always funny, you look, this goes in an arc. There's never a straight line in metal shaping. I don't know why, but if your pattern work shows you a straight line, look for a slight mistake in the pattern work. Or you're going to have a very nice part that just doesn't quite fit.
So now the depth mark that you've got marked there, how does that relate to the positioning that you're putting your?
I'm going to try to land the center of that flat spot right on that depth mark. Now, you can cheat in the Arbor press because we lose a little bit. This is stump shrinking with a lever. That's all this is. Now, the thing that we lose with a hammer, you can swing and pull back with the hammer. You can put a little English on the hammer and get a little different effect to get your tuck started. Out here close to the edge, sometimes that tuck wants to squirt out that way. So we'll just fence that dog in the yard. So I gave it a little shove that way, a little shove that way. So now when I give it a push here, we're going to get a tuck that size. Right on the boundary that we set for it. And that's a fairly large tuck.
You can see your compound curve forming in the pan
Yeah,
lower.
you can see that starting to pull. Now, swinging this hammer accurately,
Whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah, really?
swinging that accurately is a challenge.
You bet.
Some
In
guys,
Austin.
some guys do get a little offended when you talk about, you know, learning how to throw a hammer. Well, I can swing a hammer. Well, can you throw one? Because if you swing that, your elbow's going to be really hurt. So we'll plow in some more tucks here. Now, that looks ridiculous. Doesn't look much like a fender, does it?
Not yet.
Now, if I push down on this and push out with my hands, this edge will come up and around. Give the body by beef jerky treatment there. So you can see those tucks have thrown that edge over, but it's just straight. It's the same thing if you were in Pullmax and just went in the same depth all the time with the thumbnail dies. It just turns. So now as we smash these out and shrink them together, this will round this out. It won't be a giant facet. And the way that stump shrinking works, there's less and less surface area in the bottom of that dish. So when you push it in there, there's not enough surface area for that metal to live. It has to go somewhere. And the path of least resistance is into itself. The metal's lazy. If you give it an easy out, it will take it. Now I'm just trying to drag that bump around the corner. You see we've got a little hollow here. Now, a lot of guys freak out because this edge is wavy. Well, it's your run-of-the-mill classic false stretch. Does that, anybody know what a false stretch is?
No.
Bill? No? Now imagine you're sitting at your dining room table and you put your hands on the tablecloth and just turn your hands like that. It's all wavy and goofy out in front of you because this happened so fast it has displaced everything out there. Now we can wheel this up, but this is an exceptionally soft piece of 18 gauge. We'll just push it out with the Arbor press. Just a little bit of hay go that way.
Not enough to do tuck.
No.
It's real easy.
No, just real easy. We may have to stretch it some in the wheel just to relieve it if it's still hollow. Yeah, it's still hollow, but it's getting over it. So,
It's more or less secondary damage from the stretching that was done.
yeah, down here.
Right.
Yeah.
And if, once you wheel the large radius area and get the lumps out of there, some of that will relieve the tension that's holding the false stretch in there.
Now, the reason we get this, did you see how, remember how Carrie was locking that tuck on the end? This we don't have to lock because that shove mark is the mechanical lock. We've displaced it back here. It can't go back that way. So we're a 2.5 inch radius over there. Oh, wait, that's bad marketing. Gotta have the logo out.
Pretty darn close.
pretty close for lumpy, right to there. I will admit it took me a long time to get the geometry right on the dies, because I used to spell geometry with a J. Hard to get any information when you try to Google it with a J. So, Mr. Phillips, is that carnage acceptable compared to thumbnails?
Yep.
So,
It's a lot less than it would be if you used a nail or something.
well, yeah, because again, the variable is the guy swinging the hammer. One wild hammer blow takes 2 to correct, and if you screw one up, then you need 2 more, and it's a compounding problem. So, the entertaining part, we'll come throw this at the fender. And I've got 2 marks here. You can see I can stick my fingers under the end because this is still sucked hollow. I'll rough this up on the bag just quick so I'm not torturing you guys.
The only thing lacking with that process is it doesn't make that much noise.
Yeah.
So you flipped between the crown to the flat. What were you trying to knock out with the flat side?
The way I picked it up.
I thought you flipped the hammer to put the flat down.
I didn't consciously do it.
Okay.
So now, I've improved that where I can't get my fingers under it. But there's all this surface tension built up in the part. We'll wheel this out real quick so it doesn't feel like I'm torturing you guys.
Explain your selection.
Now, if we want to wheel this part this way, we have to use a 2.5-inch radius anvil just to fit in this space. If I wheel it this way, I can use a lot flatter tooling, get more work done for the same amount of strokes.
Contact flat or true radius doesn't matter at this point, does it?
Not particularly. A contact flat is touching more material. That
What radius is the one that you selected?
I believe that's an 8.5. That was just easy to pick up.
Essentially, he's completing the crushing of those pucks because he got them close with the press, and now if you're watching, he's pulling out, and those pucks are being leveled out by completing the compression.
Therefore,
It's actually still
It's still shrinking.
if you went 90 degrees to that, you would not be,
No, you'd be driving up and down through the valleys.
would not be cut. Okay.
That's why he's got the flatter die on the bottom, is it's bridging the ripples, so there's supporting on the bottom and pushing down on the high spots. slapper and a dolly. It could be completed by using a pull axe. Actually, if you had the right dies, you could just run them along that edge if you didn't have an English wheel.
Yeah, if you understand the action, the metal's not going to care what you use.
Now, it doesn't matter the tool, it's
What I
better.
said this morning, it's a continuous impact tackle. And you adjust how hard you're hitting it and how much pressure you put on the handle.
Now, let's see what we've done to our edge radius. There it is.
Show off.
I told you, it took me a long time to get the geometry right on these dies. Not ashamed of it, because it does work. It's effective. As long as you follow what the paper tells you. That's where a flexible shape pattern doesn't talk to me. It doesn't tell me what to do, where to do it, and how much.
Well, but the flexible shape pattern by itself is missing the information of a radius gauge.
Mm-hmm.
And the radius gauge with a flexible shape pattern is even more information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming closer to what your paper pattern is telling you.
And well, yeah, that's probably the thing is mix and match all of them. I will make a flexible shape pattern if I have to go away from the shop, because what they brought me is so destroyed, I have to go find another one. I'll make every pattern I can and make notation of the radius gauges and sweeps and everything, so I can shape this quickly. So this still needs quite a bit more work, but it's 75% very quickly. Now, does that look aggressive to you guys?
What, right now?
Now, the tucks in this and the lumps in it. I always tell a lot of guys, even if you're just hobbying at this, you need to be aggressive. Because if you're going to make a mistake, make it in the first 5 minutes. Don't have 2 hours in it. And I don't subscribe to the old body man theory of, oh, you have to fix all your mistakes so you don't do them again. If you pick it up and go, well, crap, as long as you don't do that again, start over. To me, it's not worth the torture.
The cost of that size piece of sheet metal is how many dollars?
Yeah,
And what's the cost of your labor for a half an hour?
yeah.
Used to figure the sheet metal was just a couple bucks a square foot, and it's probably gone up from that now.
Yeah, so I've been
It's
that,
about $3.
About $3 now.
I've been that corner up out of the way. And this would actually fit very well, but this has got a little flare to it. That would fit very well, and I'd be ready to start nitpicking and working on surface finish. But that's why I'm a shrink first kind of guy, because it makes sense to me. And while the sheet is the softest that it's going to be, I want the most shape as fast as I can get it, and that is shrinking. So any questions on this? Differences?
I often end up where you're first pushing with an extra bump, or it rises up too much and it drops down. I understand what getting that.
Could be slightly too deep or slightly too shallow with the push, because this is the correct amount of distance for that radius to be. If you're slightly off one way or the other.
Paper pattern overlap.
Yep. If you're slightly too deep or slightly too shallow, you'd have a bump up here or a bump down here. Just just a little bit of a displacement thing. So, any questions about this?
Kerry, did you do a in and out of arrangement discussion this morning?
A little bit.
A little bit? Pat, can
I
you
couldn't,
just show
I
him?
couldn't manipulate the panel as
What?
much as I normally do. I could not manipulate the panel.
Oh, because of your thumb, okay. Can you flip that so that it's the
Yeah.
other direction, just to show, now, those that have never done this before, sometimes it's an advantage to, this fits the fender right now.
Yeah,
quite
but
accurately.
when you're gonna start nitpicking,
But
that's the best.
what we just talked about before, get the highs and lows out of stuff, sometimes the flatter the dies that you use, the easier it is to level things out. And sometimes that particular arrangement of the panel is not the easiest to work with. And some people, this just freaks them out the first time they see this, but you can rearrange that panel by simply doing what he's doing there. He's not able to shrink or stretch the panel with his hands and his leg, but he's able to bend it with his hands and his leg. Now that doesn't look anything like the panel you just saw, but look at the radius. Instead of being that 2.5 inch radius here,
Now I can use a 12-inch radius and,
now he can run a flatter angle, and he can blend off all of those little inconsistencies by running it through the wheel. And when he's all done, he can put it back on his leg and bend it back the other way, and it doesn't affect it any, except it just makes it much easier to do your finish work.
That's the whole point, is you can use a broader angle to hit the highs and lows better. Is that what
You're
saying?
trying to get a smooth, even flow in your panel. And the flatter the tooling, the more it's gonna blend that out. We're working with, if he'd have had to have a high radius lower in there in order to make that work.
bicycle front fender is a great example of
Yeah,
that.
it's just, you're working with a smaller radius, and then your contact area is so small that it's hard to get the leveling effect. Now he's got a wide one, and you can smooth that panel right off, and then rearrange it back to the way it was, and it's amazing how quick it goes and how nice it comes out. If you've never seen it before, it seems just amazing that you can do that, but it's not difficult to do.
Once you figure out shaping out of the range, reading everything,
Yep.
it makes for such a much nicer surface finish. It's smaller.
Quite a bit of attention.
But it does take some getting used to be trying to use that.
Wouldn't be that tight.
The smaller panels are a lot easier to sneak up on the shape, but the larger panels.
But look at
must bend
how
the
quickly you
way.
can smooth that out. So, we'll put it back into arrangement now.
The only thing that doesn't work well is if you're making a part that has a reverse in it. The reverse locks the panel and you can't put it out of arrangement very easily. I guess you can in some cases in certain parts of the panel, but you can't do the whole thing.
You're defeating the purpose by having to shrink the edges to pull
Right.
it back out of range.
Yep.
Well, that went back quick.
Well, because the surface area is correct. So,
One of the things I say frequently is when the shape is right, it will go into arrangement. When the shape is wrong, it ain't gonna go. Period.
now, Bill has done a bunch of tuck shrinking, bunch of thumbnail shrinking. Especially the work you do, a piled thickness is a bad thing. And you can be so aggressive with a twisted end tuck that you've piled another 10, 15 thousandths there, and that's just not good.
Also, for us, we're very concerned about overall material finish. So like with tucking forks and stuff like that, marks up seriously.
You're dealing with aluminum.
Yeah.
40,000.
Some soft, some people.
All the way.
Yeah.
That's what we said.
So, what I'm observing then is by the pattern of your shrinks, has put this curve
That's why I said,
Not both curves.
that's why I said there's no straight line in metal shaping. If your pattern shows you a straight line, look for a slight mistake in the pattern.
Now, if you check to see,
It's a little bit.
It needs where we had that sucked in on the face, that needs a little stretch to come out. But
use this as your guide. When you get close, then use that to tell you we need more stretch in it. It's like the road map.
but 75% fairly quick. Because we followed what the paper told us, and we gave that radius the correct amount of distance to live in, is why I don't have to fight with this thing and throw it on the floor and jump on it and everything else. So,
Sometimes that helps.
yeah, sometimes,
Makes you feel better if nothing else.
but I guess from mechanical intervention to
Thermal,
the old flame wrench,
thermal intervention.
and we could be as gentle or as aggressive as we need to be, and it's not gonna just destroy the part. So that's kind of all I got for you guys. If you got any questions, yell them out.
Question though, it might be a dumb one. If you had enough heat and just knew exactly where to put it, could you turn that into that?
I think it would take 4.
Right, but like the concept would still be the same though, like.